country goes into lockdown.
Anyone that's been to the Auckland CBD before, you couldn't picture anything more different.
I just got off on the platform from the strangest train ride of my life. It's really eerily quiet, and it sort of reminds me of a Christmas day or a Good Friday early morning.
One person in pyjamas, which I found quite amusing. The street is really empty. It just feels really weird.
New Zealand has just entered an unprecedented lockdown to try to stop the spread of the coronavirus. A state of emergency has been declared as the country's COVID-19 cases surged by a record 50 infections to 205.
Self-isolation has been imposed for everyone. All non-essential services, schools and offices have been ordered to close. But supermarkets, doctors, pharmacies remained open. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern acknowledges New Zealand has moved more quickly than other countries to implement a nationwide lockdown. But she says the measures will save lives.
We are now a matter of hours away from an unprecedented lockdown of our country in order to combat an unprecedented virus that, left unchecked, would have an unacceptable toll on New Zealanders. I have one simple message for New Zealanders today as we head into the next 4 weeks. Stay at home. It will break the chain of transmission and it will save lives.
Ms. Ardern has also told people to behave as if they have the coronavirus and cut all physical contact outside of their households.
If you have any questions about what you can or can't do and you're looking for answers, apply a simple principle. Act like you have COVID-19. Every move you make could be a risk to someone else. That is how we must all collectively think now.
All New Zealanders returning home will be screened for COVID-19, and any returnees who show symptoms of COVID-19 will be put in isolation. The restrictions will be strictly enforced.
Every New Zealander coming through our borders will be screened. If they are symptomatic, they will be tested, and they will be put in an isolation in an improved facility. If they are not symptomatic, but they have no plan or ability to self-isolate, they will also be placed in an approved facility.
Prime Minister Ardern says the success of the lockdown will only become apparent in a few weeks, but she expects the situation to get worse before it gets better.
The country is in lockdown and we're making huge personal sacrifices in our everyday activities. But Oxford University scientists believe 2/3 of us may already have had the virus, perhaps without symptoms, and are therefore immune. So how do they work this out? Well, they assume that one person will infect 2¼ others on average, so the virus quickly spreads. And they assume 1 person in 1,000 is at risk of severe disease. Now, running the numbers, they conclude the virus started spreading on the 27th of January, 4 days before the first confirmed UK cases on January the 31st and 38 days before the first death on March the 5th. Now, their math suggests that on the 19th of March, more than 45 million people will have had the infection. But those advising the government are treating the report with caution.
We simply don't know at the moment, and that's why the antibody test is so important. So there are estimates that up to 80% or more of people in Wuhan weren't detected. There are estimates that of those who are positive, so that's a small percentage of the population who were tested positive, quite a number of them were asymptomatic in a town in Italy. But we don't know at a general population level, and that's why it's so important to get this test in place.
That policy is to stop the NHS being overwhelmed and to save lives. Scientific advisors at Imperial College in London calculate that if the epidemic had been allowed to run its course, 500,000 people may have died. But that's likely to fall to around 20,000 with the tough social distancing we're all living with and, of course, the shielding of those most vulnerable to serious consequences. Cases and deaths in the UK are rising fast, but the government's chief scientist admits the number of confirmed cases is just the tip of the iceberg. He estimates that for every death there are around 1,000 cases, the vast majority undetected, which would mean 500,000 people have had COVID-19. But if the Oxford researchers are right and 2/3 have had the virus, it should mean we've reached the levels for herd immunity. That would make a second wave of infections less likely once the social distancing rules are eased. And if that was confirmed by mass tests for immunity, we might just be able to return to normal life sooner than some have predicted.
Checkpoints in the far north running testing stations and turning tourists away with no self-isolation plans have been scaled back, with organisers saying they've achieved their desired effect. Organiser and former MP Hone Harawira has been overwhelmed with the support from police, who he says offered their assistance on the condition that volunteers move to a safer spot on the road. Te Aniwa Hurehanganui reports.
All vehicles driving north on State Highway 1 near Whakapara or State Highway 12 at Waipoua were stopped and asked 3 questions. Have you just arrived from overseas? Have you been in contact with anyone with the virus? And have you had a fever, sore throat or felt sick lately? Craig and Kylie Kelly, a couple who were travelling towards Kirikiri to isolate with family, arrived at the checkpoint last night.
We've been in and out of van parks and contacted with other people, so might as well just get checked, and we've got no dramas. As long as we're in Kirikiri by midnight.
It's good, everyone's explaining what's going on, so it's all good.
They told us what was happening and that's the way it is.
Checkpoint organiser Hone Harawira says he has been pleasantly surprised with the support from police.
To have the support of the police like this is just... We were parked up in somewhere which wasn't that clever, and then Rick Few said, if I can find you a better place and I'll give you my boys, will you move? He told us to come down here. It's been great, because he was able to get the cones up, get his boys up that end.
He says thanks to the boys, he hasn't received any trouble from drivers.
If I try to wave people off to the side of the road, they'll run me down. But they won't run a policeman down, so it's just been a positive experience. And of all of the people who stopped so far, I think we've turned around 2, maybe 3.
Checkpoint volunteer and Auckland medical student Rose Harris has been screening drivers as they pass through. She says tourists who are asked to turn around are given information and advice.
They've had very clear plans, very clear understanding of what they need to do from now on in regards to our rules and regulations that the Prime Minister has set down. Coming from a space of tautoko, manaki, how can we help them with their plans while they're in our vicinity?
Hone Harawira says the checkpoint was closed this afternoon because the lockdown has had the desired effect of clearing roads of tourists. But he says their focus continues on other checkpoints where they are identifying tourists still in the area and directing them out of the region. They are also supporting an initiative to provide ongoing medical support to kaumātua and kuia across the region. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko te aniwa, hurihanga nui, aho.
So, New Zealand, we're into this. We're into hour 6.5 of what is probably going to be a minimum 4-week lockdown. So what are the rules of lockdown? How are they going to be policed? Police Commissioner Mike Bush joins us now. Mike, thank you for your time.
Morena, how are you all?
We're very well. It's early days. So for 4 weeks, 4.7 million New Zealanders are going to be at home. This must make policing a cinch in a perfect world.
Well, it will, but we've got a big role to play in getting out there in communities. People would have already seen an increased presence of police out there on the streets. You'll see a real friendly face of police out there, discouraging people, deterring people, but also reassuring communities, because I think when you see police out there acting in a really friendly way, people do feel safe.
Yeah, I've really noticed a sense of community just when you're just walking around yesterday, just getting some air. How are you going to police this if people are flouting the rules?
Right, so there are a number of pieces of legislation we'll rely on. But first off, we'll be approaching everyone. We will ask people whether they should be out or not, whether they're complying with the rules. If they're not, they'll be warned. If they continue, there will be consequences, because this is serious stuff. It's all about keeping people alive.
What role is the military going to play in this, Mr. Bush?
Well, no, really, the Chief of Defence and I talk almost daily about this. Their people are ready to accompany us out on the streets if we need them, but at this stage we don't. But they'll be applying the same approach as we will if they're out there.
Can you tell New Zealanders a little bit about the new powers that you have under this state of emergency?
Yes, so we have, as you know, there was a state of emergency declared overnight. Civil Defence Emergency Management Act gives delegated powers to police officers. But we also have the Health Act, which enables us with medical officers of health to ensure people comply. We hope not to use these powers, but there will be occasions when we need to. If people don't comply, they can be stopped and we can take action.
The Prime Minister has basically told us how it's going to be. We're going to stay in our houses. We're going to, if we do go out, it's going to be stay in our bubble. Is it illegal if we break the rules?
Yes, it is. So that's where we come in. I can tell you, even days out from us going to level 4, people were already adhering to this. So the majority of New Zealanders are doing the right thing. And I can tell you, they want everyone else to do the right thing. So they'll let us know if people are breaching this. But, we want people to stay home and save lives. It's the most simple of messages. And if you don't comply, others will die. Really simple stuff. If you want the detail on what that means, go online. There's a website, Covid-19. If you're in doubt, have a look. But the principles are simple.
Who do we ring if we see people not complying?
Well, first thing is you might see a police officer, so give them a shout out. Otherwise, there's a number of places you can go online. Go online to our number 105 if you can go online. Otherwise, there are health lines you can ring, or if you really see serious breaches, ring us.
Police Commissioner Mike Bush, thank you so much for your time. Good luck with the next few weeks.
Thanks very much.
Peace at last. That's the reaction of Farid Ahmed to today's guilty pleas from the man responsible for causing so much hurt on March 15 last year. Mr Ahmed's wife, Husna, was amongst the 51 worshippers killed at the Linwood and Al Noor mosques. News he would not have to endure a trial came through this morning after Brenton Tarrant, in a surprise move, pleaded guilty at the High Court in Christchurch to 51 murder charges, 40 of attempted murder and 1 of engaging in a terrorist act. Conan Young was in court.
Brenton Harrison Tarrant, you are separately in charges of 1 to 15 of the Crown charge list, charged that on the 15th day of March 2019 at Christchurch, you did murder Khalid Al-Haj Mustafa, Musa Nur Awale, Hamza Khalid Al-Haj Mustafa, Ashraf El Murzi Raghib.
It took the court registrar 2 minutes and 32 seconds to read all of the names of those murdered at the 2 mosques on March 15. When she had finished, the man responsible for their deaths, who appeared via a video link from his Auckland prison, was asked to enter his plea.
Yes, guilty.
It took the registrar almost as long to read the names of each of the 40 worshippers. The 29-year-old was accused of attempting to murder, many of whom continue to suffer long-term injuries.
To each of these charges, charge 52 to 91. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Only the imams of the Al Noor and Linwood mosques, Gamal Foda and Abdul Alabi Latif, were in the public gallery to hear the shooter take accountability for his crimes, including engaging in a terrorist act. Restrictions on gatherings due to COVID-19 meant victims and their families were not even told the hearing was taking place. However, Justice Cameron Mander is determined they will be at court for sentencing, something he says will not happen until the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted.
It is regrettable that the COVID-19 restrictions that presently apply do not permit victims and their families to travel to be present in the courtroom when the defendant entered his pleas of guilty. In an effort in some small way to mitigate the unfortunate circumstances that leaves victims and their families excluded from the courtroom, arrangements were made to bring Messrs Albi and Fuda to the court to bear witness on behalf of the worshippers of their respective mosques.
Gamal Foda, who survived the shootings, turned away from the screen on which Tarrant appeared and was visibly upset as the long list of those killed and wounded was read out. He and Imam Abdul Alabi Latif both declined to comment after today's hearing. But Fareed Ahmed, who famously forgave the shooter, says the guilty pleas will give his community peace at last.
I'm very happy to hear that he has accepted his guilt. This is a step towards the right direction. I still pray that he will be a loving person and he will not practice any hate.
Sheikh Hassan Rubel was shot 3 times inside the El Noor Mosque. He says not having a trial will ease the pressure for victims' families.
I feel that all the memories are coming back, and inside, most of us, the victim families, we are feeling really shaky and emotional. So I think this decision will relieve us from lots of mental pressures.
John Milne, the father of 14-year-old Saeed, who died at El Noor, says he and his family are celebrating.
My daughter said it all. Yahoo! I was happy anyway, but now I'm happier. I've forgiven him. My wife won't have to go through all the drama that she was trying to get prepared for. She was determined not to cry, just to show him that what he'd done didn't really affect her. But I don't think she would have been that strong.
The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, paid tribute to the victims and their families, saying they had inspired all of us to be kind and more tolerant.
I want to acknowledge the courage, but also the grief of the victims. And I have no doubt this plea will have an impact on all of you. And it will ensure that you don't have to relive this through a court trial.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says when she heard about the guilty pleas, she breathed a sigh of relief.
I know that there will still be, I'm sure, a certain sense of relief that the whole nation, but particularly our Muslim community, are being spared from a trial that could have otherwise acted as a platform. Nothing will bring their loved ones back, but this is a small reprieve.
The ongoing disruptions caused by the nationwide Covid-19 lockdown means a sentencing date may not be finalised for some months. Tarrant has been remanded in custody and will next appear on May 1st for a call-over. Kei o tau tahi ahau mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Conor tēnei.
Day one of the nationwide lockdown is drawing to an end, and the Prime Minister has thanked New Zealanders for doing their bit to contain COVID-19. There are 78 new cases with 7 people in hospital. All of them are in a stable condition. While the lockdown had completely escaped the attention of some people approached on the streets by police last night, Jacinda Ardern has since clarified that a number of them were homeless. To support them and others, the government today announced a $27 million package to ensure people have access to food, a place to live and somewhere safe to go, such as women's refuge, if needed. Here's political reporter Joe Moyer.
Jacinda Ardern says supermarkets have been generally orderly in the last 24 hours and panic buying for the most part is calming down. She says she can't even imagine what some of the staff at those essential services are dealing with.
I was once a checkout operator. I can tell you that it is a thankless job at the best of times. I cannot imagine what some of those individuals will have experienced in the last few weeks. But on behalf of all New Zealand, I say thank you to them.
The Police Commissioner says overall, New Zealanders have been very responsive to the call to stay home. And as far as he's aware, there were no major problems or arrests after the midnight deadline. But he says not everyone has got the message.
We did have people overnight who claimed they knew nothing about this, knew nothing about the requirement to stay home. So very much in education. If people breach the requirements, they will be warned, and we'll keep a record of those people. If people do not comply, the very next step is, if there's no other way of doing this, because we do want to take a very caring and compassionate approach to this. But if people won't comply, we do have the authority to then detain them, take them to our place.
Jacinda Ardern was perplexed as to how people couldn't know what was going on.
I certainly can't see that being the case for long. People will be stepping out of their homes, and if they haven't heard about what's happening, they'll be at least thinking there's some kind of apocalypse right now. I mean, I can't imagine how you could not know that New Zealand is locking down and why. But I think what the police are doing is at least giving people the chance to have that information shared with them, using warnings, not escalating until they need to.
There will be a visible police presence on the streets during the lockdown, and people will be checked to make sure they're either carrying out an essential service or going to get essential goods like food or medicine. Commissioner Bush says the first approach by police will be to educate people and tell them what they're supposed to be doing, but detainment and prosecution are all possible for serious breaches or for people regularly flouting the rules.
We often take people into custody for offences once they've contemplated life and the impact of their decision. We often let them go without charge.
Moving around outside your home unnecessarily is actively discouraged, but he says people can get around locally if they have a good reason. Driving to a local park is one example.
You've heard the Prime Minister say keep it local. Absolutely. Don't be driving willy-nilly all over town. For me, it's about if it's nearby, if it's for exercise, that's okay.
To the nearest park,
nearby,
the nearest
very local,
or whatever, local and limited.
But for the right reason. But let's not forget, this is about staying home so you stay alive.
The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says several possible new clusters of community outbreak are being investigated, including a rest home in Hamilton.
There is also a number of people who were at a wedding in Wellington recently, a group of people who were part of a trip to the United States. There is also a group that appear to be associated with contact from someone who was on the Ruby Princess and that cruise ship, and that group is in Hawke's Bay, and there will be messaging out from the District Health Board around that.
He also announced changes by Pharmac, the country's drug buying agency, that will kick in at midnight tonight.
Pharmacists will be required to limit dispensing of all funded pharmaceuticals to 1 month's supply or 3 months' supply for oral contraceptives.
He says it's not a case of there being a shortage of medicines, but because people have been stockpiling, these measures are needed to protect availability. A large number of New Zealanders are still returning home from overseas, and all of them are now being screened. This morning, 360 arrived, 8 with COVID-19 symptoms, and another 160 with no secure isolation plans were quarantined. Dr Bloomfield says not everyone has been tested at the airport and explained the reason.
It could use up all our testing capacity on any one day and stop us identifying quickly other high-risk and positive cases in the community. And secondly, a negative test doesn't rule out that someone might have the infection but be harbouring it. So it doesn't change what we do with people.
The Finance Minister Grant Robertson has also given an update on the wage subsidy scheme. $1.5 billion has been paid out so far, covering about 244,000 workers. Mr Robertson says there are clear expectations and legal obligations on employers taking money for wage subsidies and to cover people taking sick leave or having to quarantine to act in good faith. He warns if that is not happening, employers can expect further action from government agencies. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
It is 5:19 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. How did your first day go in lockdown? What did you do to amuse yourselves and what observations have you got? We would love to hear from you. Modelling by New Zealand researchers shows how the country is buying time in the fight against COVID-19. But there's no certainty that the 4-week lockdown will be enough. Researchers say that left unchecked, the virus would infect 89% of the population and up to 80,000 people would die. The good news is, with the current strict measures, fatalities would drop considerably. But that scenario requires the restrictions to be in place for some time. University of Auckland's Professor Sean Hendy is one of the modellers and he joins me now. Good evening. Those are pretty grim figures, so tell us what difference the current measures make to that modelling.
Yeah, I mean, important thing about that modelling is we did a lot of that work before New Zealand took these very strict measures. So we were looking at really what would happen if we didn't. And as you said, those figures are pretty grim if we didn't take any action. But we have taken some very strong controls, and we actually think that gives us a pretty good chance of getting on top of things. One thing that's not in our modelling is, and this is something we'll be working on in the next couple of weeks, is the effect of things like contact tracing and testing. We've yet to model that, and that actually gives us a pretty good chance of reducing the length of time we'll have to be in that lockdown. But we're going to have to watch those case numbers. So really our argument is that provided we're very clearly getting on top of the number of case numbers, but especially the community transmission, that'll be a signal as to whether we can relax the current alert level 4.
Okay, a number of things in there. So doing what we're doing now, what are you modelling for fatality rates?
Yeah, so actually it would be very low. Like if we kept this up, we could keep in our model, we'd keep the fatality rate to very small numbers.
Like what, less than 100?
But absolutely, yeah. But and the big but is we'd have to keep that going for a long time, essentially until we've got a vaccine. But as I said, because we've also got the contact tracing taking place and the testing taking place, and the fact that we can quarantine people who have COVID-19, that actually means that this regime should be more effective than what we've modelled.
Okay, so just so that I'm clear here, when you say that we would need to extend the time we're in a lockdown basically to continue the benefits of lowering the infection rate and lowering the death rate, are you talking about indefinitely, i.e. until we get a vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, so just to be clear, basically what our modelling has said is what we're doing now is the right thing, right? That if we kept this up indefinitely, we would actually keep the disease out. But the fact that we've got the contact tracing going at the same time actually gives us a chance of stamping it out and being able to relax the measures that we've got on now. But if needs be, the type of strategy that we're embracing now, we can use it into the future to keep deaths low.
So if we are able to trace 100% of contacts, then we can, take our foot off the accelerator in terms of the lockdown. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, that's basically it. And it's not, we don't necessarily have to get 100%, but we have to get enough to slow the spread down sufficiently. And, we're working on exactly how efficient we have to be at that at the moment, but it doesn't have to be at 100%. We just have to stop enough people passing it on, and eventually the disease will die out. But yeah, that's basically it. The better we get at contact tracing, the better we get at testing, the shorter the lockdowns are going to have to be.
So what about...
The other thing to remember is if we did take the brakes off and we did have another flare-up, then we could always go back to these lockdowns. And then the other thing is potentially we could relax them regionally. So we're also looking at regional models. What would be the effect of doing that? For example, keeping the alert level high in Auckland and maybe restricting travel between Auckland and other parts of the country.
What about another scenario? What about if we closed our borders internationally? Would that allow us to relax movement within the country? So stop people coming in altogether?
That will help. But, by and large, we think that... But at the moment, that's less risky than the community transmission. We're really concerned about the transmission that might be taking place in parts of the country, that we're unaware, because that's where there's the potential for the exponential growth that we're seeing in Italy and the United States at the moment. So, yes, we need to keep these tight restrictions on at the border. That helps us, reduces the number of cases we have to deal with, reduces the number of people that are potentially passing it on to other people in the community. So those will probably need to stay in place for quite some time. But it's really it's the contact tracing and eliminating the community transmission that's really important.
Before you go, because some of these numbers are really confronting, should we be heartened by this modelling or should we be really worried about it?
Oh, look, I think we should be heartened, and I think I'm really pleased that that the government is using good modelling and good data. We're one of the groups that's feeding in modelling to the government, and we're definitely being listened to, and it's played a role in the decision making. I think we should be heartened by it. It shows us that we've got a viable strategy, and perhaps shows the counterfactual, what would happen if we did nothing. And I think that's always good to know, because if we succeed, we're always going to be wondering, did we really have to do that? And I think the modelling shows that, well, yes, we did.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That is Professor Sean Hendy, and he is one of the modellers who worked on the research that tells us what would happen if New Zealand did not bring in these strict measures. The Auckland Girls' School, Marist College, is one of the clusters of infection being tracked by health authorities. 11 people connected with the school are now confirmed to have Covid-19. The first case was a teacher, and that was confirmed on Sunday. By yesterday, there were a total of 5 cases within the school community. Today, it's 11. Marist College Board Chair Stephen Dallow joins us now. Good evening, Stephen. What have you been told to expect in terms of more cases?
Oh, kia ora, Lisa. Look, it is expected to grow, a bit like what our Prime Minister is saying. It's going to get worse before it calms. At the moment, we have had new numbers in the last little while that we're now hitting 13, which is 9 staff and 4 students, all in our senior years of the college.
So are those confirmed or probable cases? What can you tell us?
Yes, they are confirmed cases from parents that have been notified in the last few hours.
So what is the school community saying to you about the situation, and have you named these people to students and parents and teachers within that community?
We haven't named them. We've worked really closely with the Ministry of Health on this, who take our contact lists and are making contact directly with any students or staff that would have come in close contact with any confirmed case. We want to respect our students' privacy through this process. Our community is scared. Some of them are worried and nervous. Others are 100% supportive of what we are doing. The key thing is working closely with the Ministry of Health to make sure that we are getting the information out to our community as quickly as possible.
In some ways, does not naming these people to your school community create more fear, because everyone's looking over their shoulder wondering?
Probably does, but today we did let our community know that the students are just in year 12 and 13 at this stage, and I myself have had a phone call from the Ministry of Health, so I know that they are quickly responding to anybody that has come in close contact. And I guess, it's a case of trusting the process. We want to make sure our students' well-being is looked after in their mental health, and I'm concerned if we started naming students or teachers, that wouldn't be fair.
Stephen, what do you know about how these people are doing, the 13 people, what kind of symptoms they had, and how intense the cases are?
From the ones that I've spoken personally with, a lot of it was mild to medium symptoms, very much sort of the cold and flu type symptoms, coughing and the fever. Some of the ones that we've got test results back, because they were tested nearly 4 or 5 days ago now, are actually already feeling much better, if not back to full health. However, we're aware some are still feeling the full brunt of flu-like symptoms. I'm conscious of a couple of teachers that, have got it pretty tough, but to my knowledge, none of our team are in hospital.
So what can you tell us about the circumstances of the first case?
Well, we don't really know where the first case came from. I'm guessing we may never know.
You mean you don't know where that person contracted it from?
No, they didn't meet anybody from overseas or have any direct overseas links. There was, rumours out there about where family and things had worked, but Ministry of Health have come back going, no, that's not the case. We've also got students that may have contracted it in their part-time jobs or workplaces, not necessarily through school either. It is unknown, and I'd hate to speculate.
Thank you for joining us tonight. That is Marist College Board Chair Stephen Dallow.
This is COVID-19 Pacific Update for Thursday, the 26th of March. There are now more than 70 cases of COVID-19 around the Pacific Islands. Guam has 32 cases, French Polynesia 25 and New Caledonia 14. Fiji has announced its fifth case, a 31-year-old Lautoka woman who'd gone to Zumba class with the Fiji Airways flight attendant who tested positive last week. Lautoka is on a strict lockdown. Nobody's allowed in or out, and Nandi Airport is closed as of today. There will be no more passenger travel to the outer islands, and all local shipping services will stop this weekend to prevent any spread there. Fiji Airways put on an emergency flight late yesterday to take stranded Samoan passengers back to Apia and bring home Fijians who'd been stuck in Samoa. As of last night, the Samoan government has completely shut its borders and will continue under a state of emergency. Whaleolo Airport's terminal is closed to the public. From today, the Immigration Ministry has temporarily shut its services and will not be issuing any travel documents. There are no gatherings of more than 5 people, and that includes churches. The Kingdom of Tonga is also under a state of emergency and has cut all international flights. Schools remain open until tomorrow, and gatherings in public places are limited to 40 people outside and 20 people inside. As of last night, bars, nightclubs and kava bars shut down. Funerals, weddings and birthday celebrations are also banned. In the Cook Islands overnight, strict new travel restrictions have been put into place. From today, nobody can enter the country unless they do 14 days quarantine in New Zealand and be tested negative of COVID-19. When they arrive in Rarotonga, they'll have to do another 14 days of quarantine. The Ministry of Health is expected to announce the quarantine arrangements for those in New Zealand within the next 48 hours. Parliament is expected to meet today and approve emergency funding to support Cook Islanders trapped in New Zealand while being quarantined. Several Pacific Islanders have announced state of emergencies, and they include the Solomon Islands as of yesterday, also Papua New Guinea, Tuvalu and Nauru. Now I'll be back tomorrow with another weekday COVID-19 Pacific Update.
There are 78 new cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand being reported today, and this is comprised of 73 new confirmed cases and 5 new probable cases, and that is as at 9:30 a.m. this morning. More details or information on these cases, including the probable cases, will be provided via our website shortly and updated as new details emerge. We will also be moving to provide information about the age and gender and geographical distribution of these cases, the latter as a map on either our website and or the COVID-19 website. There are 27 individuals that we can confirm have recovered from COVID-19 infection. Currently, there are 7 people in hospital and all are in a stable condition. 3 are in Wellington Regional Hospital, 2 in Nelson Hospital, and 1 each in Waikato and Northland Base Hospital. None are in intensive care. Our laboratories are continuing to work hard to process and report test results quickly. Yesterday, 2,417 tests were processed around the country, and so the total number of tests processed to date is 12,683. The average number of tests over the last 7 days is around 1,400. A reminder that anyone who has been tested is expected to remain in strict self-isolation, that is, isolating themselves even from those people in their own household until the test result is available. Public health staff and Ministry of Health staff are actively following up all close contacts of each case. In terms of our new cases today, the majority still have a link to overseas travel, including being in the same household as someone who has returned from overseas, or they are the close contact of an existing confirmed case, or they are part of a known cluster of other cases. At the moment, we are investigating several possible clusters. As yesterday, there is the Marist College in Auckland and the World Hereford Conference that was in Queenstown earlier this month. There is also a number of people who were at a wedding in Wellington recently, a group of people who were part of a trip to the United States. There is also a group that appear to be associated with contact from someone who was on the Ruby Princess and that cruise ship, and that group is in Hawke's Bay, and there will be messaging out from the District Health Board around that, the local public health unit, about people who may have been in places where they may have been exposed to that person. So we want to identify them and ensure they are taking appropriate measures. And also a rest home in Hamilton. I don't have any further details about those clusters, but we will be providing information on them on our website. So in summary, the combined total of confirmed and probable cases in New Zealand today is 283. On the topic of personal protective equipment, it's important that our health workers and also people working in essential services, at least some of them, are able to access PPE. So we have a number of measures in place to ensure that PPE equipment is available for those people. It is already available for a range of health workers, and we have a separate stream of work to ensure there is a supply to essential workers, for example, staff in supermarkets, and that supply is continuous for the period that we are in the current arrangements. An example for the DHBs, we're releasing 600 masks later today to District Health Boards from our pandemic stock. We know that we have good production of masks onshore at a rate of more than 200,000 to be produced each day, so we are making sure that there is a steady flow of that equipment, both masks and other PPE, to our District Health Boards. I also want to just announce on behalf of Pharmac a change to the pharmaceutical schedule effective from 11:59 p.m. this evening. And this relates to ensuring that all people can access the pharmaceuticals that they need over the coming month. We have seen some stockpiling, unfortunately, by people. There is no problem with the supply chain at the moment, but we do not want to get into a position where some people are unable to get the pharmaceuticals they need because others have them stockpiled at home. So, from later tonight, pharmacists will be required to limit dispensing of all funded pharmaceuticals to 1 month's supply or 3 months' supply for oral contraceptives. Pharmacists may use their discretion in implementing this more immediately today. There is no change to the way prescriptions will be written, and people won't need to visit their prescriber more frequently. It is simply a change to the amount that is dispensed at each visit to the pharmacy. And this is indeed to manage medicine stocks and ensure our supply chains are robust. There is no significant shortage in any area at the moment. Once again, as with the current arrangements that Pharmac announced a few weeks ago, pharmacists will still be able to make exceptions on a case-by-case basis. For example, where people live remotely and it's harder for them to access the pharmacy, or where they have mobility issues, so it's a challenge for them to get out. And many pharmacies are now in the process of, if they haven't already, organising home delivery of pharmaceuticals. So my final message before I hand over to Mike Bush to update you on some matters is just to reiterate some key messages. These are unprecedented times for both this country and indeed people around the globe. We are all in this together, and we will expect the number of COVID-19 cases in New Zealand to continue to increase over coming days and for at least 10 days. If we all do our bit and help to break the chain of transmission, that number will start to decline and we will be able to get on top of this. So I just urge all New Zealanders to continue to do their bit and, of course, as ever, look after yourself and look after your friends, your family and your community.
3 things I'd like to cover off today. The first one is in relation to the milestone event at the High Court this morning in Christchurch. I want to acknowledge the courage but also the grief of the victims. And I have no doubt this plea will have an impact on all of you. and it will ensure that you don't have to relive this through a court trial. I'd also like to make mention of the very large prosecution team and all those involved in getting this to this particular point. I can't talk any more about this, obviously, because the next milestone event will be a sentencing matter. So I'll leave that there. If there are questions later, I'll do my best to answer them, but really I'll be very limited in what I can say. Secondly, what I want to talk about is this is day one of how we go about responding to level 4 of the COVID-19 response. What we're seeing out there today is no surprise to you. You've already reported on it. The majority of New Zealanders are already ahead of that compliance. They're doing a great job. Our job is to ensure that New Zealand and New Zealanders are safe, that they're well, and that we ensure that our country is sustainable. So let's just think about that most high-level principle. Stay home to stay safe. Respect others. If we don't comply, the consequence of that is that people will die. Our job is to ensure that we keep those people safe and well. How we're approaching this is by being very visible out there in the community. Our approach is that initially we're all about engagement, we're all about encouragement, and we're all about education. What we'll do next is engage with people to ensure that they know what's required of them. We'll take a discretionary approach in the first instance. People will be warned, people will be challenged about whether or not they're an essential service or they're going about essential things. But we will ensure that people will need to comply. And I'm happy to talk about how that might look. But I know that people everywhere across New Zealand are very, very keen for their friends and for everyone else to do their best to keep each other safe. And we'll do everything we can to ensure that happens. The third thing I'd like to talk about is how we're greeting and welcoming and looking after people returning to New Zealand. In very quick time, we set up a process at Auckland Airport first, but any other international airport, to manage those people in this new environment. Everyone who arrives in the country from the early hours of this morning have been greeted by customs officials, by immigration officials, by other officials, including police, and then triaged. The process works like this. If you have any symptoms, you will be then taken by health people to a place of quarantine. We have a number of hotel locations proximate to Auckland Airport. You will be taken there. Everyone that lands here will also be taken to nearby locations and triaged there. If you have a plan, if you have a place to go, we will help you get there. If you have friends coming to pick you up, only one person in your bubble will be allowed to pick you up and take you to that place. Otherwise, we'll facilitate it for you. Because it is, again, ensuring that we keep everyone else safe. We've had 360 people through Auckland Airport this morning. That process has been managed well. A few speed bumps, as you'd anticipate, but we'll do everything we can to be compassionate and caring to all of those people. But again, making sure that we all comply with that process.
Over the the span of 2,000 years, we have been given a collection of 66 books written by 40 people in various cultures, time periods, and languages. Today we call this collection the Holy Bible. Upon investigation, we find that these 66 books combine to form a message to humanity from a being outside of space and time by writing history before it happens. The Bible predicted the advent of the New Age movement and the New World Order thousands of years ago. It also tells us of a man who will rule this world empire and what his true intentions will be. All of this has been in the works for thousands of years, and it all hinges on Satan's ability to deceive mankind. The Apostle Paul in the 1st century AD wrote several letters to early churches, which are now called the epistles. The far application of these letters are a clear warning for us today. It is a warning of impending deception that will influence the whole world. Paul warns us of this deception in Ephesians 5, where he states, "Let no one deceive you with empty words." Then in his first letter to the Corinthians, he again tells us, "Do not deceive yourselves. If any one of you thinks he is wise by the standards of this age, he should become a fool so that he may become wise." In a letter to the Romans, he describes those who willingly live in lies when he writes, "Their throats are open graves, their tongues practice deceit, the poison of vipers is on their lips. For such people are not serving our Lord Christ, but their own appetites. By smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the minds of naive people." In a letter to Timothy, Paul clearly describes the world we see today when he writes, "The Spirit clearly says that in later times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons." In the second letter to the Thessalonians, Paul describes the New World Order and the Antichrist when he wrote, "Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. Don't you remember that when I was with you, I used to tell you these things, and now you know what is holding him back, so that he may be revealed at the proper time. For the secret power of lawlessness is already at work, but the one who now holds it back will continue to do so till he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will overthrow with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the splendor of his coming. The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with the work of Satan, displayed in all kinds of counterfeit miracles, signs, and wonders, and in every sort of evil that deceives those who are perishing. They are perishing because they refused to love the truth and so be saved. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth but have delighted in wickedness." The Apostle John, while in prison on the island of Patmos, had a vision of the end times and the deceiving entities that will walk the earth, stating, "And the great dragon was cast out, the ancient serpent who is called Devil and Satan. He who deceives the whole habitable world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. He deceives my own people who dwell on the earth because of the signs he was granted to do in front of the beast, saying to those who dwell on the earth that they should make an image of the beast who had the sword wound and lived." Jesus Christ himself gave his discourse of the end times when he stated clear warnings of the signs of the end. "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of the birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you ahead of time. Jesus Christ died for the sins of all mankind. That means he died for the New Agers, the Freemasons, those in the Illuminati, the world elite, the Luciferians, the Satanists, and even me and you. God himself taking on humanity has given mankind a free gift of salvation and of true spiritual freedom. Now we all have a choice. We can live in darkness, allowing evil to enter our lives and unwillingly support the work of Satan and his fallen angels. Or we can let Jesus into our hearts and be spiritually saved forever. There are no prerequisites, rituals, or tests for accepting this gift of salvation. All one needs to do is ask honestly for Jesus to come into their heart. Remember these truths. God loves you, God cares about you, God wants nothing more than to know you personally and save you. Sin separates people from each other and God. Jesus died for your sins and rose again. You can receive Jesus now and know God's love right at this very moment. I pray for you all and hope the truth will indeed set you free. Thanks for your time.
I think in conclusion I'd like to appeal to those people that have been researching this for any length of time, specifically long periods of time, maybe even years. To you, I don't think this is going to require a lot of convincing. I think that subconsciously you know that a lot of what was said here is true. I think that you have seen over the years a lot of conclusions about what the New World Order is and what their motives are, and I know that you know that it doesn't really explain all the loose ends and tie them all up. I think that you know, after kicking down so many doors in New World Order research and seeing those that truly expose the New World Order, this theme, that it is in fact theistic Satanism behind those doors. I know that you've seen that. You've seen that they are high-level occultists that really run this show and that are in the shadows. And that even those front men at the very tops are only front men, and that the real movers and shakers are those that hold very dedicated beliefs about the worship of Satan. So we even have this idea that somehow doesn't apply. We have a phrase that we'll say, which is, it doesn't matter what you believe, the fact is that they believe it, which sort of means, yeah, sure, they're all occultists at the top, but it doesn't really matter. They're just sort of deluded. And I think that's a very dangerous position, because if you actually are saying there that it doesn't matter, it's not actually true, there isn't really a Satan and there isn't really a power that they're serving, then we should just, again, think that this scenario has something to do with whatever we make it out to be. It certainly can't be about a cosmic war of good and evil, because we've already decided that that can't be true. Yet at the same time, we're pointing out that these people are knowingly worshiping Satan, which is something that the Bible has said has gone on from the very beginning. The kings and queens of all the old systems were always sacrificing their children to various gods and Moloch and these types of things. And they are still doing it today and are gaining power from it. The problem with believing that is it makes too much sense that all of this energy with the New Age preachers and teachers and truth movement icons and gurus are doing mainly two things. One, they're promoting this idea of a New Age coming in which you're going to be God and you're going to be evolved and all the obvious stuff that's preparing you for the system of the Antichrist. And the other part of that is they're telling you that Jesus isn't good, you shouldn't pay attention to him, or at least they're trying to misdirect you, tell him he's just this other guy, he's not really who the Bible says he is, or they're trying to discredit the Bible. There's only two things that these guys are doing. They're telling you and preparing you for the new system that you're going to think is your utopia, and then they're telling you to not pay any attention to the man that the Bible said would crush the one that these people at the top are worshiping. Does anybody see a problem with that? That we have been told what to think about the Bible and Jesus Christ by Satanists. The problem here is that what we've been told and what we've been prepared to believe is all what we would choose to believe. It's all very seductive. They're telling you that you can be as God. They're telling you that there is no real accountability for your actions, that anything that you want to do is good and normal and should be praised. These ideas are very difficult to resist. Truth really is irrelevant at that point, because we will fight to defend those ideas, regardless of if they are true or not. And that's why there's so many conflicting quote-unquote truths in the New Age and in the truth movement. You know, that's why the first thing that you're taught in the truth movement is that truth is relative. oh, it doesn't matter, your truth is just as good as my truth, and we'll fight to defend this completely erroneous idea. I've got news for you. It doesn't matter what way the universe operates. The fact is that it does operate one particular way, cause and effect in a closed system. We are dealing with absolute truth. Maybe yours, maybe mine, but it is absolute, and it is one. We should be concerned about looking for the truth. And I suggest to all you researchers out there that you already have enough evidence to know that Jesus Christ is who he says that he is. You owe it to yourself to figure out more about him the way the Bible says that he is. Not the way that the New World Order says that he is, but the way the Bible says that he is. The Bible has been continually discredited. You're told not to listen to it. You're told not to pay attention to it. They do everything under the sun to keep you from it. They always have. So why don't you just realize that and take the time and figure out who is Jesus according to the Bible?